Hello everybody and welcome, it's John Pace. The other night I uploaded what just might be my very last HLG HDR video for a long while. A brief tour of a few of the landmarks in and around Saigon, mostly monuments of French colonial architecture within a short walking distance of my apartment, which gave me an excuse to haul out the venerable 16 to 35 millimeter G Master, an incredibly sharp, versatile, and crazy expensive hunk of glass in my very first Sony lens. Yet until quite recently, it was one of 3 lenses that stayed tucked away in the closet since it was simply too massive to fly on the anemic original Xeon crane. But that's all changed since spending my pension on the Xeon Crane Plus last week. I'm also able to fly the 50 millimeter planar f1.4 and Voigtlander 65 millimeter macro, 2 other heavyweights in my kit. What's incredible is number 1, the Crane Plus cost half of what the original crane cost me just 2 years ago, and 2, it's almost identical in size and weight to the original crane, meaning I can comfortably carry it around the city all day long without collapsing onto the pavement in a crumpled heap from exhaustion. Anyhow, since creating a few HLG sample videos, it dawned on me that if you really want to know what your lenses are truly capable of, there's no better way of evaluating them than watching your videos in true HDR on a 55 or 65 inch OLED display. And when I say true HDR, I'm referring to UHD Alliance Premium Certified HDR, not some intentionally confusing marketing bullshit concocted by the VESA coalition, allowing manufacturers to slap an HDR label on anything with an on-off switch. John Fowler, founder of Film and Digital Times, a trade journal, which if you're not familiar with, you really ought to be, has said time and again that full-frame cinema is the biggest revolution since the talkies. But I'd take it a step further and say full-frame HDR cinema. Still, if I had to choose, I'd take Super 35 HDR over full-frame standard dynamic range video any day of the week. Today, practically all mirrorless cameras and even some drones shoot log, so chances are you're already shooting high dynamic range video. 55 inch OLED TV sets costing less than $1,500 are commonplace, and now all we're asking for is an HDR grading monitor that costs less than a Tesla Model 3. Gamers have dozens of HDR monitors to choose from. Content creators, none. But as long as filmmakers and colorists aren't demanding them, I'm afraid the situation won't change for a long time to come. And as batshit crazy as it sounds, not a few reactionaries would like to see all progress halted at Rec 709, a 25-year-old 2 megapixel standard, which has got fuck all to do with filmmaking. If you want the authentic cinematic experience, turn the brightness on your 11-inch MacBook Air down to 50 nits, crank the volume up to 200 decibels for the previews, and have a hyperactive child sucking on a Twizzler stick and drinking a large Slurpee sit behind you and kick your seat non-stop for 1 hour and 37 minutes. Another observation. Until, out of morbid curiosity, I began shooting fake 8-bit HLG HDR sample videos with the Sony a7 III, I almost never filmed in broad daylight. I seldom shot at apertures narrower than f5.6, and I never ever pointed my camera in the direction of the big blue sky. Be that as it may, I'd heard a lot of talk about how Sony mirrorless cameras were supposed to be notoriously susceptible to dust, that they're dust magnets. Nevertheless, in the entire year or more since picking up the a7 III and gratefully ridding myself of all my horribly outdated Fuji and Panasonic gear, I've only blown dust off the sensor on 1 occasion. And I live in one of the filthiest cities on earth and change lenses quite frequently. So quite naturally, the very first thing I'm expecting to see in my epic portrayals of French colonial architectural masterpieces is dust. Yet astonishingly, I'm not seeing a single speck. Maybe I need to stop down to f32 like the pros. All I'm seeing is gobs of gorgeous detail, tonal transitions so satiny smooth they recall nothing less than the fine art platinum prints by the peerless Irving Penn, one of the greatest photographers that ever walked the face of the earth, and some 10 majestic stops of dynamic range. Admittedly, 10 stops is still nearly 8 shy of HLG's theoretical maximum of 17.5. But HDR, like digital cinema, is still in its infancy. Anyhow, my forecast is we get fully articulating LCD screens in 5 years and HDR grading monitors in 10. Let me know in the comments section below when you think we'll see the very first affordable HDR grading monitors. Anyhow, the whole dust issue is blown out of proportion. I recall blowing dust off of tens of thousands of film negatives and transparencies, along with dozens of surfaces in the darkroom for decades. Anyhow, we're gonna call it quits for now. If you liked what you saw today, hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please consider subscribing. See you in the next episode.